Great. All right. Well, I am delighted to kick off our panel here of folks here at Georgetown to be talking about institutional approaches to student mental health and well-being. And I thought we'd start by just going around the virtual horn here so folks could introduce themselves and give a little bit of background about their location in the university and what we're working on. And then we're really going to move into a free-flowing conversation about how we think about student mental health more broadly on campuses, and from the institutional level, how we think about mental health and well-being and the opportunities and challenges that we have on our campuses today. So I'll just start. I'm Jen Willard. I'm a professor of psychology here at Georgetown University and a vice dean for faculty affairs in our College of Arts and Sciences. I am a psychologist, but I am not a clinical psychologist. I'm a developmental and community psychologist. And I'm a part of this conversation because I've been involved in an initiative coming out of President Jack DeGioia's office that asks us to be how we can become a campus of well-being for all faculty, staff, and students. And so that's why I'm one of the boxes in your Zoom screen today. And I'll just go around and we can tag each other. So Jocelyn, would you mind introducing yourself next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I'm Jocelyn Lewis. I serve as the Director of Inclusive Pedagogy at our Center for New Designs in Learning and Scholarship. We go by the acronym of CANDLES. In that space, I do a number of things related to supporting faculty and graduate students in their teaching mission. And I'm here primarily today because one of the projects that I co-direct is the Engelhard Project for Connecting Life and Learning, which has been at Georgetown since 2005, inviting faculty to integrate issues of student mental health and well-being directly into their courses. So I'm excited to share about that work.
Great, thank you. Catherine, would you go next?
Course. My name is Catherine Castle. I am the Assistant Vice President for Student Health here at Georgetown, and I oversee, when we talk about well-being and mental health, I oversee our counseling and psychiatric service, our student health service, and our health education service. So services that actually have a direct impact as far as students and resources. And I am actually a clinical psychologist by training. So I think that helps in this era of thinking about the individual level and then the community and institutional levels of mental wellness and well-being for our students.
Great, thanks. And last but definitely not least, Ellie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eleanor Doherty. I'm the Vice President of Student Affairs at Georgetown, and so happy to be here. A recent addition to Georgetown. I've just completed my first year here. And in this role, I really look at the future that our students shape. I welcome a future that they transform, but I realize the responsibility we all have within higher education to enrich, support, provoke, and inspire those students so they can transform the world. That's not an easy task. So I think we all have job security for some time. I come to this work called by Jack DeGioia as well. He is that initiative that Jen mentioned earlier is one of the largest reasons why I'm here, coupled with our mission and our work with students and the partnerships that we find with our faculty. But I come to it from both the public and private side. I spent the last 9 years at the University of Connecticut working both with the state and the university on mental health initiatives, and of course welcomed the partnership with the Jed Foundation. And then prior to that, the University of Chicago, and of course, Columbia University, my own alma mater as well. Really a privilege to be with everyone today.
Great, thanks so much. Well, I'm excited. I think it's a delight for us, I think, to get the chance to spend time with each other talking about these issues and our experiences. And hopefully we will be able to provide some information and experience to those of you that are watching about our experience at Georgetown and potentially other institutions that we might bring here to talk a little bit about the accomplishments, or at least the strides that we've been trying to make at Georgetown, some of which might be specific to us or specific to a Jesuit kind of campus, but hopefully also potentially generalizable to your own institutions. And then to talk about kind of the challenges and opportunities when we think about institutional level change, when we're thinking about um, an entry point into the promotion of mental health and well-being that obviously centers students, but then also thinks about the faculty and staff around them and thinks about the different levels at which we could be pursuing these goals of promoting health and well-being for all members of our campus. Ellie, I was wondering if you might start us off as from your perspective, right, Vice President for Student Affairs, on a little bit more on how you're thinking about mental health and well-being. Are they the same? Are they different? And from your perch, as it were, right, how you've come to approach the promotion of health and well-being on campus.
Well, I think one of the most important things, Jen, is it's changed over time. Prior to the pandemic, I would have talked about sort of the prevalence of anxiety and stress. I would have talked about, let's make sure we're educating for a student that we know is approaching the average Monday, stressed and overwhelmed. Today, it's a little bit different. Today, after seeing the impact of the pandemic, after realizing all of those measures have gone up and sort of being grounded in the loneliness report that I know we're all very aware of, but also seeing the fierceness with which our students want to be in educational settings, and how much they care for each other and they care for their families. And they are willing to significantly adjust behavior. I've started changing what I'm talking about and how I do this work. And I was speaking at a high school last week, and I'm thinking more about what is it that I want you to leave with? And there are 3 C's that come to mind: care, conflict, and curiosity. I want our students to not be afraid to ask questions. And certainly sort of feeling stressed, feeling anxious, feeling like I'm not the smartest one in the room inhibits the ability to say, I don't know, let me ask. And yet, if they're not on our campuses asking questions and discovering, maybe even making a mistake or two, are we fulfilling our mission to transforming adolescence and enabling these students to be leaders in the world? We don't say, I don't know, and we don't discover without conflict. It's okay to be in conflict with each other. And frankly, I'd like to encourage a little bit more debate among students rather than sort of pulling apart with a sense of, I am right because I have the answer. So to what degree are we enabling healthy conflict on our campuses to allow for that curiosity to thrive? And then the third piece, which I know has been in our vocabulary for a long time, we have to care for one another. If I care for you, I'm willing to go into tension and debate ideas. I'm willing to say, I don't know, let me discover something more from you. And I think that results in a healthier human in the world. Not just a student who's going to graduate with a great honors thesis, but a student who is emotionally strong to match the intelligence that we know they come to us with. And the question becomes, instead of being worried for our students, are we leaning into building environments that create care, conflict, and curiosity, and not be bounded by the classroom, not be bounded by the residence hall, but see that as a collective commitment that we all engage in?
Great, thanks. Let me jump off of that not being bounded by the classroom or the residence hall. I think one of the themes that certainly has that I've experienced in this work at Georgetown is that thinking about that through line and thinking about the whole student and the different environments and contexts in which our students find themselves or choose to be, and how we weave well-being and mental health concerns appropriately with care in all of those. Jocelyn, I was wondering if I could turn to you to talk a little bit about the Engelhardt Project and how that initiative has grown and its foundations here at Georgetown.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And thanks for that lead in and context, Ellie. Some background on the Engelhardt Project. So in 2005, as we were starting out, we were responding to a grant call. And in that space, and in our proposal, we hypothesized that by integrating student well-being issues into the classroom as part of a course, as part of the learning experience, and connecting this to students' experiences with their academic coursework, we hope to have a positive effect on the culture of well-being at Georgetown, and also have a positive effect on student learning. And we know there was really good attention to student well-being and mental health issues outside of the classroom, and this felt like another space where we could be intentionally and deliberately doing this work. And thankfully, we have had and still have some really great faculty interest in this ask and invitation. And so what we ask faculty to do is really do three things when they think about teaching an Engelhard course. They choose a mental health topic that they think connects well to the content of the course, and with that topic in mind, assign a reading related to the topic, partner with a campus resource professional with an expertise connected to that chosen topic, and invite that partner into class as a guest lecturer, discussant, co-facilitator for one day in the course, and then follow up with a written reflection assignment for students after that time. And we hoped and thought that a few things would happen, that by adding this into the academic course content, we'd be doing some destigmatizing work and normalizing these conversations as yes, belonging in your residence hall and on campus, but also in the classroom, that talking about these issues in relationship to theology or psychology or biology, your English paper, that there's relevance and connection there. And that also, by doing this with faculty and campus resource professional partners, we'd be doing some of that care demonstration that Ellie was talking about, and showing up as people in relationship that also then built relationships for our students so they could connect to the campus resource professionals if that was the right direction, and connect to each other around these conversations. And I'll just say lastly, and sort of setting this up, one of the things that I think has worked well for us is that from the get-go, we let the definition of what well-being, mental health issues could be that faculty could see working in connection to their course as very wide and open. And I think Ellie named it at the top. It's really changed. The topics and the things that faculty said, oh, this connects and this matters, and my students are interested and exciting about this in 2005. There are a few topics that have stayed really consistent, and they've just grown and developed and evolved so much over time. And that's felt like a real strength of the project and the work that we've been able to do at Georgetown around this.
Great, thanks. Jocelyn, you were mentioning that one of the key components of the Engelhard approach is this partnering between faculty who are teaching in the classroom and the health and mental health professionals and staff that are on campus. Traditionally, I think, at least I'll speak to my experience before participating in Engelhard and being at Georgetown, those tended to appear to be different parts of campus, perhaps both literally, but then also figuratively, right? In that historically mental health and well-being was probably not a priority in the classroom, or might be seen as some other, right, responsibility. Catherine, within your portfolio, you have kind of the prevention intervention continuum, right, with both the psychiatric service and health education. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how those aspects, right, and the diversity of professionals and services and approaches you have, how that has connected to well-being and potentially changed, which has been, over time, and where you see that going.
Yeah, thank you. I would echo what Ellie had started off with saying. Prior to the pandemic, we were seeing increases in anxiety and depression. Those have continued, but there are also other things, loneliness. There is, more of a thought around sense of belonging and connection. That's really important, and a sense of community, and how that not feeling connected to your community has a significant impact on a student's well-being and their mental health. So within the services, it's, fortifying our counseling services, but also looking at different ways that students can receive care, because not all students need a clinical approach to what is currently happening for them or around them. So really, it's been really thoughtful in looking at how do we fortify the clinical services, but also branch out into the larger community. And that may be connection, more intensive and intentional connection to candles, or more outreach, more training. I like to think of it as, how do we have a wonderful community of care, but how do we provide additional training within our community so that there is no wrong door for a student to go to get support, and they may eventually be referred or walked to the more or most appropriate service, but kind of extending that community to include more training for faculty, for food staff, for division of student affairs staff, so that students can get what they need, or at least start that process anywhere. And I think has been something that we've started, that we're really interested in, and I think is extremely helpful for our students, because the needs are so vast. And for some, it may be a connection to our campus ministry, and that's what they need, which means that instead of sending them to a counseling center and utilizing that expertise there, that another space is open for a student who may need that level of care. So it's really kind of looking at a stepped care and a more community holding, so tightening our safety net in order to provide more services to more students, or more opportunities for enhanced wellness and well-being to more students.
Great, thank you. That notion of both of, as you were talking, both of the kind of connecting students to the appropriate level of care given their current situation, and also the expansion of the community of care to recognize that students may enter in many different doors and may need different kinds of care. So as you were just saying, right, connecting to mission and ministry may be an appropriate response for a particular student, where a clinician might not be the best fit, right? And that leaves the clinician open to be able to serve a student who is more in need of that particular kind of connection and service. That brings me to think about, from this, first of all, thank you all for that that background and that insight. It leads me to shift us a little bit to thinking about at the institutional level, right? So again, students are centered in all of this, but as we think about an institutional commitment to care and well-being, and there may be many of the teams that are watching this that are thinking about both at the student level, but at a larger level as well, simultaneously, how do we create change in the context in which our students are living and learning in order to promote mental health and well-being? That's been one of the things that in the initiative that I've been working on with you all in different ways, that we dubbed Cura Georgetown, coming out of Cura Personalis, care for the whole person. We've been thinking about kind of 3 different levels of connection and care and entry points for well-being. One is at the individual level, cura personalis, right? Both for students, but also for faculty and staff. And then we've been thinking about it at the community level, both formal and informal. So the different kinds of formal attachments and identities each of us and students might have. So say to a residence hall or to a club, or for faculty to a department, right? Or staff to a department. And then at the university level, right? What are the things, if we think about the university as kind of the scaffolding or the infrastructure, sometimes visible and sometimes invisible, in which we're all living and working? How do we think about ways to change or to improve or reduce barriers at that institutional level? And I think, as you were saying, Catherine, as we begin to think about more broadly about care and well-being, it starts implicating aspects of university life that at first glance might not be directly related to well-being, right? If we think about the conditions in which we work and live and play here. So I was wondering if I could open it up and we could just jump in for a conversation in hearing from you all about the challenges and opportunities or things that have been on your mind or would be on your mind as we think about institutional level change and are keeping students at the center, but are thinking more broadly or encompassing more aspects of university life and living. What kinds of things should other teams be thinking about that we've had as either lessons learned or things that we're still trying to work on that would be useful, do you think, to share in conversation that we can begin talking about? And I will just let everybody open up and just chime right in, and we can talk with and on top of each other as we have this conversation.
I guess I want to start with know what you don't know. And we should model our own I don't knows. Here's something I say that normally mildly irritates a lot of people. I am an expert in the student's future, in their tomorrow. They are experts in their today. And I think it's really important that we integrate those two areas of expertise. So, you know, I've got the bookshelves and I've got the scholarship, and I understand the context of adolescence, but I don't understand the experience of adolescence today. And so as we are increasingly working together across universities, which I think is beautiful, that sort of we're breaking down silos between scholarship and practice. As we do that, let's also invite the scholarship of the student experience of adolescence today. And then let's contextualize and inform and develop that within our conviction in the tomorrow and in our understanding of the scholarship. You know, where I worry sometimes is when I'm talking about my childhood or when I'm talking about research that comes from the 90s. It's different to be 20 today, and they're willing to talk about it. And so coming together and integrating, you know, the scholarship of experience, the scholarship of practice, and the production of knowledge is an important convergent point, you know, for all of us at this point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking too in around the question of these layers and spheres, that some of what I think the work from a Center for Teaching and Learning can do and is trying to contribute here is we talked about the often siloed nature of some institutions, and helping the faculty who already have a natural inclination or an instinct or their own pedagogical practice leans in the direction of centering students' wholeness with their complications, their well-being and mental health in mind, and granting permission, and then beyond that, even encouragement and support to keep leaning in that direction and do that actively and intentionally and fully. And then for those where perhaps that's not how they've thought about that role, but they're open to that, saying, yeah, you too, come on in here, because the learning is stronger and better The teaching is more fun and exciting and rich when we're doing this in relationships to each other in that cura personalis approach, in that wholeness of ourselves and everything we bring. I think that's been some of just what's been exciting that we can lean on. I think with the Engelhard project specifically in mind, we did find from the beginning we needed to say, yeah, you can open up these issues in the classroom and you're not alone, in the vein of say what you know and what you don't know. Your expertise, you know it, and we're not asking you to be a clinical psychologist or a therapist here. We have really wonderful people on campus who are those things and can support here, but opening up the connection between your expertise and student lives and student well-being, you can do, and here's the community of other people at Georgetown that you can turn to when questions come up or issues are posed, or along the lines of what Catherine was saying earlier, you're worried about a student, and what kind of concern are you having? Is it a conversation that's needed? Is it a handoff that's needed? So we've been making sure that community is very alive and present for faculty as they start to do things that some of them thought were not their job, perhaps initially, and some of them knew they wanted to do, but really love the support and feel more permission and willingness to do that because they know who else is around them when they do so.
Catherine, you said we could talk over each other, and I'm getting excited. Like, Catherine, I really want to warmly welcome your perspective here, and want to, tell a quick story. Georgetown is a beautiful place to be new in. Everybody's so kind and so welcoming, and they want to give you space to find your way. And I was talking to now a dear friend and colleague, and he was saying, well, I don't want to get in the way with mental health issues. And I said, caring is not proprietary. Like, you do not require
Exactly.
caring. You are qualified. You are qualified to
Yep.
care. And I enjoy having this conversation with licensed clinicians. I am not a licensed clinician. I do care. And Catherine, I'd love your thoughts on like what is clinical care and what is care, and how do we do that best in residential communities where we're all together?
Yeah. So I'm so glad you kind of, started our conversation, Jocelyn. Being a clinical psychologist, I've also been an instructor still as a clinical psychologist. But part of our role when I was faculty was if somebody wasn't coming to class or somebody, there was a change and I noticed it, part of what I thought I should do was say, hey, stay after. What's happening? Are you okay? Do you need anything? And that is completely within the scope of anyone who is interacting with a student. And it's not becoming a clinician, it's being a caring, observant community member who knows that student maybe because they're in your class or maybe because they come to the rec center all the time, and being able to have those conversations, that's completely within your scope of professionalism, your scope of as a community member. And I think the more then that we're able to make sure that all of our caring members have a sense of what resources are out there and who they can connect to, that then allows them, because a lot of times they know the student better than that professional is going to know them initially. They usually are really wonderful at asking great questions. Students, there's a level of trust, and they can get students to the next place. But I'm always thinking about how do we optimize people's skill set. And as a professor, an instructor, one of your skill sets is that student, you've seen them, you notice when there are differences, and just saying, hey, I noticed this. Because the interesting thing is sometimes students don't feel that people see them or notice them. And for somebody to say that actually in its own way can be an intervention. So you've started this wonderful process that now you can then walk the student, and we do have that, walk the student sometimes to the next place that's going to be helpful. And that just kind of is like the ideal. That's what I would love for us to be, most universities to get to that point. But yeah, that's a level of caring that everyone should feel comfortable saying, I can do this.
And to me, I think one of the things that allows that and facilitates that feels like a culture change and an examination of role and permission giving, right? So that it becomes normative or normal. I want to say expected, not that everyone does everything, right? But that care is an expected part, and we have permission as faculty or staff to, as you said, Catherine, to just ask that question, right? Or to say, I noticed you. I remember, Jocelyn, from some of the work that Candles did around mentoring a couple of years ago, right? That one of the things in interviews with students that they said was so important around their belonging on campus was that they had a one-to-one connection with someone, a faculty or staff member, right, who kind of knew who they were, right, and noticed them and saw them. And I think, as you were saying, Catherine, with that asking the question being an intervention in itself, we wouldn't necessarily think of asking a question or saying, hey, how was the rugby championship last week, like we did in my class this week. We wouldn't think of that necessarily as a mental health or a well-being intervention. But if we're talking about the kind of community that we're establishing, right, and the kinds of conversations and relationships that are meaningful, I think that's one of the things when we talk about kind of at an institutional level, right? What do we do and how do we work on the culture such that that just becomes a regular part of what folks can do, faculty and staff can do, or that students can reach out in that way or have conversations, right, about mental health, about how they're doing, or feel like that they're seen and they're known. I wanted to ask you all to kind of build off of that as we think about kind of what our different roles are, our different opportunities to connect with students and with each other as the professionals and the faculty on campus. I'm sure it's not unique to Georgetown and unique to this time that everyone feels busy and stretched. I think pre-pandemic that was probably true. We saw it in stark relief in the pandemic in different ways. And it doesn't seem to have subsided. I don't know if it's inherent, right, in higher ed or not. But I'm curious to hear thoughts about how we think about mental health and well-being, again, for students, faculty, and staff, when we are a collection across our ages of driven, motivated people, right, who want to excel at our jobs or our classes and so forth, are busy with time, maybe stretched for resources. How do we think about well-being and mental health entering the conversation, much less becoming a part of our culture, when there is so much happening in our own lives, in the world around us? Have you all seen that in any ways, either in kind of your own practice or professional experience, or as you think about the teams that you work with or the students that you work with? How do we do this in a time when everyone is really kind of on the go and working hard and working long hours?
So I'll start with that. Just from, I think, the staff component. So part of it's modeling this behavior, but I think having, and I'll just give an example. Ellie is a great supervisor, but she also understands, that we do work hard, and there is a level of stress and intensity at times. And, having your boss say, we need to think about how do we, allow some to step back, some staff to step back and others to fill in, and kind of doing this rotation so that you're able to take a breath. And I think that's a change. And that's a change that needs to happen consistently across higher ed, to be able to realize that people do need a time to take a breath. It's not meaning you're not working, but sometimes you were in such an intense interaction for whatever period that you really do need to regenerate, but another staff member or another leader steps in to kind of fill that gap for a period of time. And I don't think that's something that's done on a consistent basis within our field. And I think it has to be done more because it really is hard. And students will even say, well, you're here all the time. You're answering emails all the time. How are you telling me not to be this driven person and to take a breath and go outside and sit down? So we have to model it, but we also need permission and from leadership and within, as we do our own supervision to do those be more reflective and allow for those kind of change in and out of staff and faculty to be able to continue the work that we're doing.
Go ahead, Jocelyn.
I think the faculty and campus resource professionals that I've been working with over the years have really held us accountable, I think, around this in some ways. It was not that many years into the project where they said, okay, so you're asking us to help students show up as whole. Seems like we need to be modeling that, but boy, do I not feel that way. And it's really hard to bring or to manage all that I'm managing. And so in trying to support a project where that they were just right, that they needed to be able to show up whole and show students what that looked like, we had to pay much more attention to supporting them and their work, their challenges, their relationships. One thing that I think we've done well there is create gathering spaces that are themed around different issues that are coming up in the project. But I think the culture of those spaces over the years, I hope, have really communicated that what matters most is please come and let's be together. And when we could, let's have some food together. When we could, let's be in a physical space together, but Zoom can also do this. And just creating space for that connection and conversation. What's going on in the classroom? What's going on with students? What do you need? How can we help? And I have the privilege of being in a role where that's an appropriate question for me to be asking the faculty as we do this work and then try to develop those resources or think about, so what next? Because these are the needs that you're articulating. But it's really, I think it's an important confession that we didn't know when we created a student well-being project that it necessarily needed to also be staff and faculty well-being too, but we heard that, and we keep trying to pay attention to that too.
Yeah, I have a dear friend from decades ago who said to me, "Who helps the helpers?" And he could not have been more right. And the pandemic put that in very stark relief. And so I do think a huge amount of credit to higher education for taking the responsibility on of student health and well-being. And in some respects, a huge credit to the pandemic for telling us that we needed to invest as much in our staff and faculty as we do in our students, which raises the question within all of us, I hope you're leading to retire. I hope as we come to work every day, we are looking at that TIAA CREF contribution rise and imagining a life beyond the role. But that means it has to be okay for you to leave it behind. And so we need to build systems and structures and use technology and processes and protocols that allow us to leave confident and calm. And sometimes the helpers are the hardest to give help to because they have a definition of help that is dependent on who they are, not what they do. And I think, and I have to tell you as a leader, it means so much to me to hear Catherine reflect that back. I hope we all feel that way. And I hope we all enable ourselves to be helped, like to allow that to happen so that we can walk away. It is a risk to our students and ourselves when we can't. And for those of you who know me on this panel, it's time for a funny story. Uh, I just thanked Dr. Fauci for the pandemic when I bumped into him the other day. The reason for that is because of the pandemic, I started riding horses. It was one of the few things you could do. Like, you don't want to be within 6 feet of another horse. And I always make time for that. I always make time for that moment. It's the only time I'm exercising, I'm thinking something of something other than myself or my job. And whatever it is, if it's a horse, if it's I had a colleague who jogged to watch the sunrise at the Capitol yesterday, whatever that is, a partner, a walk, a dog, a horse, a child, protect it. Don't take it for granted, because it will allow you to be that person you want to be the next morning. And there are meaningful things that we learned from the pandemic. And I know for me as well, it was a stark reflection on, am I in the right career? Am I doing what I want to be doing? I'm so committed to this work because I do it in this community of people, especially those of you who are watching here today. But we've already asked ourselves the hard questions. We know we have to take care of ourselves as much as we take care of our students. And now it's a question of letting that happen, the helper letting the help come. Anna, maybe you want to start writing.
Jocelyn, you want to go ahead?
I just love that advice. Okay, I'll start writing. And I'm also thinking about the other things the pandemic drove home, which I pause, transition, slowing down, that came forward really strongly for us in trying to support faculty and others doing hours in Zoom. And thankfully we haven't let those go. That some of the faculty who teach Engelhard courses are integrating 3 minutes of a video or something at the beginning of class. Okay, let's just all get to this space together. And here's how we're gonna achieve that today. Or including participation points for no phone and talking to your neighbor, and sort of reestablishing those in-person practices of chit chat and connection, and those just being made more obviously needed and then staying with us. I hope we can hold on to those.
Yeah. And I'll just add, as I'm sitting here as a clinician, I'm like, wow, what we're talking about is setting healthy boundaries, professional and that's something we also want for our students, is to be able to learn how to set healthy and appropriate boundaries so that you can work really hard, but have a life, enjoy the sunset. And, that's so thanks. I was able to be a psychologist for a minute. That was great.
Thanks for getting that expertise out in our panel, Catherine. Yeah, no, it's so true. And I co-taught a class of first-year students this semester, which is just a delight and has been a while since I taught them. And we set a practice of beginning each class by taking a breath and just getting settled. And in the spirit of our whole selves showing up, sometimes I said, the way my day is going, I'm going to need 2 breaths. So I'd love everybody to take 2 with me, right? And just even these relatively small practices, students comment on at the end of the semester, right? That it's another way for them to feel seen, I think, right? Is if we acknowledge now we're all here in community. And and we cheer Jack, whose rugby team came in second, or something, and have those kinds of things. And I think doing that amongst ourselves as colleagues as well, right? Those moments of connection and reflection help strengthen the fabric, right? The weave, the workman left between us, beyond the specific tasks or the specific goals that we have for that day. I want to be mindful of time, and so I want to pause here and see, for each of us, as we're thinking about the teams that are a part of this institute, right, and are engaged in their own ideas and goals about change that they might want to bring to their own institutions. To each of you, any kind of advice or thoughts or reflection as we're particularly oriented towards thinking about institutional level change, right? Anything from your experience or things going forward that we might want to leave the folks who are watching? I think we've done a nice job of showing, if I can say that ourselves, of showing the connection of the micro and the macro, right? We've moved back and forth between policy and practice and individual student and moments of connection and so forth. But anything that you all want to share as we wrap up the panel, and folks will then be moving, into the institute and their team time and workshops to be working on these issues.
I'll actually start because I'm interested in how others are going to respond to this. We are not in crisis. And I think it's incredibly important that as institutions, we look into our mission and find the way to live in a new normal. But if we live in a state of perpetual crisis, we'll fail to produce the scholarship and the experience and the memory in the culture that we want our students and ourselves to have. And it's really, really easy, particularly when you're in my role, to fall into the crisis of the day. But the reality is the majority of students are so eager to be here. So are the faculty and staff. They're having a pretty solid day and they want to be transformed. And if we can think from that perspective and try to overcome a really sustained period of interruption and crisis, to learn from it and allow us to create a normal that is dynamic and embracing the potential of adolescence, we're doing our job. That's what we do really, 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 really well. When we normalize crisis and fear, I think we're straying a little bit and we're not taking good care of ourselves. So I think we're not in crisis. Let's start there. Think about our mission and what we're about. For me, these three concepts of care, conflict, and curiosity ground me in my day, get me out of worry, and get me excited to be working with the folks you see here today.
So I think the things I would like for people to really kind of remember, it's optimizing the talents in your community. So everyone can ask, are you okay? How are things going? I think when you can optimize the level of care and caring, that goes a long way. And just to highlight what Ellie said in the beginning, don't forget to include students. Because I kind of think I know what a 22-year-old wants and needs. I'm wrong, and I'm completely wrong. And including them in every step that you can, because you're then going to create a community that really does meet their needs. They will feel seen and they will utilize. You have a higher probability that they will utilize and find helpful the resources that they engage in.
Such good advice. Thank you. You too. I think just along those same lines, remembering that we're so much better together, and that, we're not in crisis. Doing things in community means also just continuing to extend the community and make that the normal and the everyday too. You just heard me say how much I love this project and that I'm with at Engelhard. One of the things that has been such a gift is getting to know all of the folks on campus who are part of the safety net so that I can help them be resources for faculty and students. But boy, it's so much richer because all those relationships exist, and then I get to keep building them and helping others connect. So don't do it alone. Stay together. We're doing better together.
So you all made it easy. I could just say ditto, ditto, and ditto and be done with mine. I think I would build on what you all have said, and following on, Catherine, you're saying, remembering to have students in every part of the process going forward. I would say, particularly for leadership, right? And as I have nudged my toe or dipped my toe, whatever the right analogy is, into some leadership positions, is to remember to bring the faculty and the staff and the professionals along in this process as well, right? One of the, like you were saying, Jocelyn, one of the benefits of Engelhard and meeting and working with so many different people, one of the real blessings of having worked a bit on this Cure Georgetown Wellbeing Initiative, it's been the excuse to legitimately sit down with a number of people around campus and say, where have you seen well-being show up in your life here at Georgetown? And where hasn't it shown up? And what should we be doing better? And that, one, I've learned a lot. Two, Catherine, echoing what you said when you ask a student, how are you doing, that can be an intervention. The conversations with faculty and staff, many have said, are an intervention as well, right? Being asked about this, being asked to contribute value by saying, this is what I'm seeing or what I'm not seeing. This is what I think we could do better. This is what I think, our community is doing really well. It can take longer to engage lots of folks in the process, but it's such a better process and outcome, I think, when we're moving, as you were saying, Jocelyn, Ellie, when we're moving together in this direction and really taking the expertise, be that the lived experience everyone has in their own lives, the practice expertise of the professional work we're all doing, the scholarship that some members of our community are creating, that really recognizing the talents and the gifts and the skills that are here, and for many folks are ready and willing to engage, right? Being busy notwithstanding, right? But making folks who are willing to make the time and to want to contribute in the best way that they can. So I just want to say thank you to the three of you, Jocelyn, Catherine, and Ellie, for agreeing to be in this conversation. It was a treat for me to have a legitimate excuse to ask you to come together and chat for a little bit about a topic that we've all been working on individually and together in partnership. So thank you for all of that. And best of luck and best wishes to the folks, all of the teams that are engaged in the Opportunity Institute. Hopefully this conversation has been helpful or fruitful for you as we encourage you all in the work that you're going to be doing in the days and months ahead. So thanks.